Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 45th episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And this week, we're going to be talking all about visibility. When do you keep your head down if you are an underrepresented group in your workplace, but also why it's important to make yourself visible, the positive impact that has, and how it can also help your career trajectory. And in order to do this, I am joined by Louise Goux-Wirth. Louise is an equality specialist in higher education, working to increase engagement for staff and students through enhancing a sense of community and connection. Her core passions are discussions around race, LGBT+ inclusion, mental health, and theories of intersectionality. Her proudest achievement last year was running in the Kigali Marathon and raising £1,000 for Imbuto, the foundation of the First Lady of Rwanda, to support their programs in education, health, and youth empowerment. This led to incredible opportunities of performing at the V&A Museum, London City Hall, and Google HQ. Louise wears her passions and values firmly on her sleeve through various charity engagements, public speaking, and being visible within her communities. She recently spoke at the annual This Can Happen conference as part of a panel on faith, diversity, and mental health, where she shared her experience of racism in the workplace and how organisations can effectively support their Black staff. She describes herself, rightly so, as unapologetically ambitious, which is a trait that has pushed her through various challenges and obstacles throughout her life. She uses her social media platform to talk candidly about her experience with adoption and lived experience of mental health, to create an open and authentic dialogue. Her aspiration is to become a leading CEO in the charity sector, combining her passion for equality, amplifying diverse voices, and creating sustainable social change. So needless to say, we are delighted to have Louise on the show with us today. Welcome to the show, Louise.
Thank you for having me.
And I've read out your bio, and people know a little bit about what you do and what you've done. But I'd really like you to say a bit more about what you do, how you got into the work that you're doing, and anything else you want to share about yourself.
So I've been involved within the equality world for since I've been a student, and I kind of stumbled into it. I think is a fun story. I think I started to getting involved in activism because I got joined my LGBT society, and at that time I just saw it as just a space to have fun, to go out, to go drinking. And as I got more involved with it, I realized there was so much more to the LGBT community beyond the nightclubs, and that's when my activism really started. And I kind of got involved in as one of the vice presidents of the society, and from then it really just built on. I think sometimes once you dip your toe in the water and you realize the bigger picture, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many really important issues that needs to be raised and vocalized, and I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me within the LGBT society, so I was really keen to just change that voice and change that narrative. And then I gradually ended up running for one of the full-time positions within my students' union, and that was such a shaper in terms of who I am today, and I'll always be very thankful and grateful for it, to have that space to dedicate to do what you love and get paid for it, and have a platform to elevate other people's voices that aren't your own, and to really learn from other people, and to change the system where you can. But I think is the biggest one that I learned from there is just how you can use your position of power to really make a change with people, for people around you, and kind of give up some of your space to do that as well.
Louise, that's really insightful. Something that you just said that really struck a chord. You said within your LGBT society there weren't many people that were like you. Am I right? That's what you just said. Isn't it? Yeah. So are you able to just expand a bit more on that? So how you identify yourself and how you didn't see yourself in that space, and what the things that you did to try and change that?
So By people who looks like me, I mean like other kind of like Black LGBT students, and I think that is really who leads organizations and societies and groups has a huge influence in terms of how that group kind of is directed and the work they do. And sometimes it's not always about if you have a Black member in that leadership position, they will solely talk about race, but is sometimes the importance is that it makes that group more inclusive and inviting to a wider wider parts of the community, which predominantly is kind of like in the LGBT community sometimes is very, very white in many communities really. So I think being visibly in a visible position of power within the LGBT society, it was really great to be able to just be visibly proud, really. I think I think back then my activism back then wasn't as political as now. So back then I think it was very much more about being visibly proud within the LGBT society. But without, I didn't have the kind of context and language that I have now in terms of actually what that meant beyond that. So yeah, I was very much like a baby in my activism back then.
Well, we've all got to start somewhere.
Every step's important. Exactly.
It's a constant learning process, and I always say this. I say we don't know everything. When I was saying this to a friend actually the other day, that her daughters were going to a Black Lives Matter protest, and she said, they need to speak to you, Layla, they want to show you their placard. And we were talking, and she said, well, they're going to be quarantined in their room for 2 weeks because I'm really worried, but I think if they need to go, it's important. And then I said, isn't it funny, when you're 16 you know everything, and then as you get older you think I don't know anything. And this is the thing, we're on a constant journey of learning, but had we been 16 we would have known it all.
Exactly. They're confidently so as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? I think often as well, what you've said has struck me, because the way that not the way that you or necessarily I choose to practice being an equality and diversity practitioner, but the way in which it's set up is very siloed. So we have Black initiatives, we have LGBTQI initiatives, we have women's initiatives, but of course we're not in boxes, are we? We're women, we are LGBTQI, we are of various heritages, cultures and races. And of course with race comes culture. It's not the skin colour in and of itself, is it? It's the lived experience due to our skin colour, and it's the lived experience due to our cultural backgrounds. And I still think there's a long journey on learning. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
In terms of the journey of learning?
Well, in terms of people understanding the intricacies between culture, race, ethnicity, nationality, etc.
I think hugely, and I think there's kind of like a sudden awakening. I feel like it feels like a global awakening to it now, but I think it's been like a conversation that's been happening since forever, but it's just now more people are actually, not even more people that are in the mainstream are talking about it. Let's rephrase it into that way, in the perceived mainstream. But I think one of the stories I've just thought back is when I was working at UEA and I had just joined, and this was only later on that I heard this, that some of the students were really excited that I had joined the organisation, because it was the first time that they could see a visibly Black LGBT member of staff within the organisation, and just how much of a difference that made to them. And I think back then I was like, guys, okay, I'm literally just being me and doing my job. I don't understand how my presence has so much of an importance to you. But actually, and it wasn't even that I like talked about being a part of the LGBT all the time, because I literally was there to do my job, but I supported diverse equality like societies and communities. But I think for them, just as much as for them as a student, visibility in people who had positions of power within the students' union, that who they were was really important. And I think it was equally for me when I was a student. I really looked on who was actually shaping and moving my students' union, and that mattered to me. But the comment I got from the student, it got me really emotional, because I was like, oh, I was just being myself. And actually, that's what visibility is, isn't it? You're just being yourself, but you, and sometimes unknowingly, give a sense of space and permission for others to do the same, and do it do it authentically, and it means that you can really kind of open doors, or even just make kind of diverse members of the community want to open the door in the first place, purely on who they see behind it. So yeah, it's just, sorry, it just put back to my head, because I think back then, again, like so many things at the time you don't really click in terms of how deep the deepness of what it means. But I think they just really craved, and we all do, we really crave to visibly see the organizations that we are part of that reflects our experiences, and the spaces that we feel that we can, if there was anything that we could safely go to them and they would understand of lived experience. So I think ever since that comment, it really just like, it's really important that we're not just like physically visible, but also like verbally visible. That sounds weird, verbally visible, but verbally outspoken in our values, and our values of equality, and our values of our stories, because there's people who probably won't ever approach you and say, oh my god, just because of your existence, sounds really like a lot of pressure, a lot of your existence, it makes so much difference to my life. So I think there's that's a full stop to that.
No, that, because that one of my questions, as you know, to you was, what does visibility mean to you? So I think you've put that really beautifully, actually, around, it's not just about your presence is really important, but how can you vocalize that, and how can you be true to your values around equality and inclusion and justice within the workplace?
Yeah, I think visibility for me is really about being yourself authentically, is really important, and it isn't about putting on a show either. It's literally just like living your life as you are, in your fullness that you are, and in the fullness, that sounds very poetically said, but in the fullness that you are, and doing it in a way that feels right for you. That's really important, because people are visible in different ways. There's no one way of doing it. There's no guidebook of doing it. It's just about doing it that it feels right for you.
And so what do you think are the different ways of being visible then? Of course, there isn't a right way. You're right. You're absolutely spot on about that, because we'll each have our own preferences, styles, cultural ideas, nuances, etc. So, I don't know whether you want to talk through some ways that visibility, we could show up and be visible in our workplaces.
I think there's ways of, like, you could do it there's people who are very loud and outspoken in terms of their visibility. There's people who do it in small ways, in terms of within their friends or within their families. There's in terms of just sharing your experiences about how it is to be you, and there's often that people do that alongside kind of key dates. I don't know, like Mental Health Awareness Week, or LGBT History Month, Women's History Month, but it's about doing that also when it's not those days, to make it very much the everyday, the kind of everyday conversations, rather than just the when they get kind of like suddenly a really deep focus on it. And I think what's happening currently is that there is greater visibility happening on race issues, which is really good. But in another breath, I think a lot of the like Black community, or like well, what kind of like what happens when this quietens down in some levels, and how do you continue I think there's a lesson learned of importance of the importance of visibility that is authentically done and continuously done. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Louise.
Key message of authenticity, I think, within that.
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult though, isn't it, to be completely authentic in the workplace for various reasons. It might be the unspoken rules, the implicitness, the whiteness of how people should fit in, etc. So, what would you say to people that might be struggling? They want to bring their genuine or their best professional. My friend Jonathan Lamptey, whose podcast, Element of Inclusion, he talks about your best professional self, which I really agree with. It really resonates with me, I should say. But if people are struggling, if they're being bullied, if they're worried to, put picture of their partner who's same sex or trans, or they don't feel able to bring someone to their workplace or they wouldn't be invited, or they don't feel comfortable, then visibility is quite scary. So do you have any tips or advice when the environment isn't conducive really to being visible, and actually all someone might want to do is keep their head down until they can get another job and they can't be their authentic self?
I think my main thing is that it has to feel safe for you, and there is no like obligation to be visible. And I think is acknowledging that actually, as you said, for some people being visible would put them at risk, either in terms of their well-being or their kind of like physical safety. So even like, for example, when there's like, I don't know, like National Coming Out Day, there is no obligation for anyone to actually come out on National Coming Out Day, because I think is about respecting the people that for whatever reason, there's so many reasons that they aren't able to do so, and to say that is just as fine as the people who are extremely extremely visible. I think in terms of if feeling scared about being visible in the workplace, I think don't do anything that you wouldn't feel comfortable in doing, and there's a real importance of the support system that you have around you, of having the people who identifying it, either through like friends or colleagues, or like linking in with like staff groups within organizations or externally to the organization that can create that safe space for you, and really to be visible in your own time. Just because there's an awareness day doesn't mean you have to tweet about your mental health. Like, you can just be visible to yourself. Sounds really weird, the way of saying it, actually. Like, just be visible to yourself in the spaces that you feel comfortable in, but there is no obligation to, because I think if there's an obligation, I think that becomes a very slippery slope. It has to feel right for the individual rather than the movement per se, because I think it has to be right for the individual.
Yeah, and we don't want anyone feeling that it's an onerous task, do we? We want people to feel that they have got the opportunity should they wish to take it, as opposed to feeling obliged and, like you said, not feeling safe.
Exactly. And there's a lot of power. I think a few weeks ago I was reaching out to colleagues in my workplace to get some stories for Mental Health Awareness Week, and I really wanted to get some really authentic, strong stories, not the kind of happy, chirpy, my life is great, how are you, but also do it in a space that feels safe for people. And I had one of my peers who messaged back being like, you know what, I would really, 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 really love to get involved with this, but I am not at a place at the moment to be visible externally about it, but I really support what you're doing, and thank you for reaching out to me. And they were like, I really understand that my demographic there's a need for my demographic to be allowed a voice within the mental health conversation, but at the moment I'm not able to give that voice because I'm not actually in a good personal space to open myself up on a onto the organization. And getting that message was really interesting, because I think sometimes you're just used to everyone being like, yes, I'm on board, what do you need? And actually it's really about respecting when people say that, to just be like, I cannot do this right now, but at the same time to really I really was just said, like, just do it. There was like zero obligation, just do it when you're ready. And actually I think people in those positions is a really important for them to be able to see other people's stories being visible, because I think it gives them little bits and nuggets of strength, really, to be themselves and be visible in whatever way they feel comfortable in. But it doesn't always have to be about you going public nationally about your experience.
Yeah, so it's a step by step thing.
Yeah, it's so personal. It's so personal. So it's yeah.
And so also I think it is absolutely organisations' responsibility to enable, support, empower underrepresented groups. So obviously every organisation will have a different underrepresented groups. But what do you think then organisations and workplaces can do to support bringing their authentic or their best professional self into the workplace?
Ooh. Okay, so
A quick question. Come on, Louise.
I know. That's such a good one, because I think there's a big part of that is about making sure that the system empowers and enables underrepresented groups to be their best selves. Because I think sometimes it's not enough just having a diverse workforce if the system is not built to support them. By that I mean making sure that there is the kind of staff networks for people to have a safe space to build their communities, and that kind of peer support, which is invaluable in so many circumstances, to make sure that their policies are up to scratch, in terms of when staff may need it, and to make sure that that the people in leadership roles, but not just people in leadership roles, I think even just peers, that they do active listening, and they do they actively listen to the voices of their diverse staff and what they need, and then that they are able to use their power and their position to take that into account, and to be comfortable in being uncomfortable when is needed. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's happening globally at the moment. And to really take the time to understand that not everyone's experience is the same, and to be able to really say, like, how can I help, and then actually help. Which I think sometimes we're very good at asking, how can I help, and then that's it, just to feel good that we've asked. But I think a lot of it is about the systems and the structure, because I think that is it can be gatekeepers to, like, it's the gatekeeper to a lot that is a gatekeeper for a lot of things that gets tied to how a staff member feels within the organization. And even things such as if staff members raise grievances, or they challenge the organization, that the organization needs to be really able to really hear that. And then also about, when we're talking about visibility, it's also about who is visible in each kind of like rank of an organization, because actually that makes massive difference in terms of the decisions that get made at every step of every step. So making sure that there's diversity in your leadership team, there's diversity in the people that oversee policies, oversee grievances, oversee just every aspect that has an impact on the experience of your staff members.
No, that's really helpful, and I think you're right. I think I really like the point you made about just because you have one senior woman does not mean that you're representing all women. And there's always plurality. So that senior woman's experience is going to be different from people throughout the organisation. You know, we're half the world. We are going to have different experiences and different needs, and that does need to be recognised. And yes, there's a commonality in being a woman, whether biological or whether born into a female body or deciding to be female, but there will be a commonality around that female experience. But that doesn't mean one senior woman will represent us all.
No.
So I just always think it's really important. Thank you for saying that, because I think it's always really important to point that out to people. Just like there isn't one black experience, isn't one disabled experience, there isn't one experience. And then what I'd like to ask you is your top 3 tips for anyone who they want to be more visible, their organisation's supporting them, but they've still got some fear. They're still nervous. It's scary to put yourself out there. So what would be your top 3 tips for someone who wants to be more visible but feels scared?
I think I would start off with within your safe spaces. So with your best friend or family member or kind of social group that you may be a part of, and to really kind of like take it in steps that feels good for you, and start off with the spaces that you're familiar with. Secondly, that there is no right way of doing it. And there's something really powerful of the diversity of ways that people are visible, because I think people need there's just not one way of doing it. So to make sure that it feels comfortable for you, and I think lastly, that during that journey of visibility, there will be people who may not be welcoming to that. And I think it's really important to talk about that, and that if that does happen, to make sure that you have, all the time anyway, but make sure you're surrounded with either 1 or 2 people that you can go to for support, and to not let that one experience dampen who you are and your voice and how you want your voice to be heard within the world.
And I think on that point, Louise, it's probably, maybe, I don't know what you think, but to have a group of supporters around you, people that, if something does go wrong, like you said, don't let that dampen your spirit, but who are your supporters, so you can go and talk, get your energy back up, regroup, and come back in and decide your strategy and what you want to do.
Yeah. Supporters and allies around you, because I think both of them are really, really important. So yeah, I agree.
Brilliant. And then my final question for you, because I also know that you do a lot on mental health, is how you have been and how you look after your mental health during this period, during the COVID pandemic, and especially with Black Lives Matters movement. Those of us that are in race campaigning, this is incredibly exhausting and draining. I mean, you see the images, it's very, very harrowing. So I just wondered, how have you been looking after your mental health? How do you look after your mental health? And do you have any tips that you want to share with others, with listeners?
So I've been doing mental health campaigning work for quite some time, and interestingly, I got involved in a new project through Time to Change recently, and the task was about top tips of how to look after your mental health. And I was laughing to my partner, being like, how it's quite ironic to be trying to do to give top tips when you yourself are like just kind of drowning in it. And it's kind of being okay, even as a mental health campaigner, to have your own days that you're like, what on earth is going on? So my top tips would very much be to put yourself first. I mean, I know we hear it all the time, but it is so much easier to preach to other people than to practice it yourself.
Yep, guilty.
And so yeah, so I feel like I'm passing this on to whoever listens, because I've had it to me, and I'm just there like, no, but, and it's so easy to put yourself down. So like, put yourself first. If you need some time out, take some time out. If you, I think there's a lot of talk about reaching out, like if you're in a bad place, reaching out. But actually, when you're in a really bad place, reaching out is energy. And sometimes that energy drains you more, or you don't have any energy. So I think there's a two-way thing, which is something I heard recently, which I was like, you know what, this is really a good advice. There's a reaching out, yes, but also if you have friends who are, that you know that they're struggling, to like lean in and support, because I think sometimes putting the onus on the person who's struggling to reach out is it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you're in a really bad place. My other tip that I would give is that the feeling will pass, and that's not to dismiss what you're going through in this very moment of time, but no emotions are permanent. At the time they feel very permanent and very real, and as if like you're going to be in this for the rest of your life, and how do you grieve? But like, yeah, nothing is permanent, and to just literally take it sometimes like 5 minutes at a time or hour by hour, like breaking down your day to help it be more manageable. And to lastly, I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to like snap out of it, or you have one bad mental health day, and the next day you're like, right, today's going to be the best day ever, let's go. But actually sometimes your mind needs that time to just either grieve or just experience emotions. And I think there is purpose in every single emotion that we go through, so to be able to feel them, but obviously to feel them in a safe way. And then my advice in terms of the wider things going on, I think that it's in my, maybe back then I wasn't, maybe not switched into it, but I think now I feel like the awareness of race equality is become huge. And I have found that sometimes on social media, it just becomes extremely overwhelming to like every single newsfeed to be talking about it on a constant basis. And I think that it's okay to tune out and put your mental health and well-being first, and like, just because you're not posting about it, or again, that the visibility, isn't it? There's lots of being like, if you're not visibly talking about it, then it means you don't care about it. And that the importance of that I think the reason why it's gone up in the talking about race equality is because it's become much more visible on more platforms. But I think it's okay that if you want to take some time out on social media and just recharge, and that you can be visible and vocal about race equality in so many variety of ways that isn't just about being engaged in the social media conversation, and to find the right way that works for you. But at the core, like, look after your well-being, and also reach out to others around you to ask whether they need, if you're in a good place, they need support themselves in terms of being well during this time, because I think it's going to be going on for quite some time, and so we need to support each other and share our resilience and share our strength, so we can all kind of collectively get through to the other side.
Thank you, Louise. That was really eloquently put, and you're absolutely spot on. So how it's okay if we're not visible, that doesn't mean we don't care in this space, and it doesn't mean that we're not doing things, and it's okay to take a break and look after ourselves. So I'm really hoping that people are super inspired by what you said and what you have said, because I am. And so if people want to know more about your work, or they want to get in contact with you, how should they do that?
So the best way to get in contact with me is probably through Twitter. I'm at Louise _GW. I'm fairly active on it in terms of, but yeah, that's really the easiest way to contact me. And I'm very open to having conversations on equality and diversity, very passionate about Rwanda, my home country. And so I'm very interested in being involved and part of new projects and things that may emerge. So yeah, that's the Twitter's the best bet of getting in touch with me, and then to be able to take it from there.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you have lots of positive conversations with listeners on Twitter, and I'll also share your LinkedIn if that's okay with you on the show notes. You know, we're connected on LinkedIn. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. I just want to, you know, I wish I could come and see you right now, but obviously that's not going to happen for a while. No. But I wish you a lot of good mental health, a lot of space, and, you know, to just power to your elbow with all the work that you're doing, Louise.
Thank you, and right back to you as well.
And so it's brilliant to have you on the show, and please do join us next week where we'll be talking more about mental health and inclusion. Until next time, bye.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.